Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about food safety. So here to help us with this episode, we have our very own dairy connoisseur, Abby Prince.
Hi, guys!
So we found this to be kind of a big issue that we haven't touched on in any episodes before, and we after doing the whole Ag Mythbusters thing, we noticed there's a lot of stuff having to do with misconceptions about how food is made and how it gets to the plate and how imports and trades work and all that kind of stuff. And so there seemed to be a big concern with food safety that we realized we never really addressed
Which
before.
is so lame.
Yeah.
You would think we would have covered it by now.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of the big ones, like GMOs, urban sprawl, water, food safety. We've only hit one of those. That's pretty sad.
We're getting it handled, guys.
We're getting there.
Don't worry about it.
It's a work in progress. You guys don't know, but we got plans. We got big plans. So we're finally...
You have no idea, literally.
Don't look at my notes on my phone. It's messy. But
too many episodes. Actually, probably not enough, but it's enough for now.
Probably not enough. It'll get me through 2 months, but it'll be great. Don't worry about it. So, yes, we're finally tackling food safety, which I think is
I'm excited for this episode.
I'm excited
it's going to be kind of fun.
When I was giving a lot of speeches on ag issues, food safety was one of my favorite topics to cover just because it's so, it's interesting how food safety works because there's a lot of issues in ag where it's there's one major cause to the issue that is not easy to solve. Food safety has a lot of little causes, and some of them can be solved pretty easily, and some of them can't.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of the interesting part about food safety and why it's so unique of an issue.
Gotcha. Cool.
So, yeah, so let's just jump right into
Let's
it.
do it.
So, I think before we kind of get into the issue of food safety, it's important to kind of talk about who's involved with food safety and who's responsible for regulating and who's responsible for making sure that our food is safe and what their role is.
Yeah.
So we're going to go over, so there's, how many is there, 4 agencies?
USDA, FDA, FSIS.
I thought there was one more, EPA.
EPA, yeah.
Yep, 4. So there's 4 government agencies that are all responsible for collectively working towards a safer food supply, and they each have different, and distinct jobs from each other. So the EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, is solely responsible for environmental regulations on agricultural production. But the thing with the EPA is, even though they don't directly affect food safety, their regulations that impact the environmental part of agriculture does have a ripple effect that impacts food safety. So that's one. And right before we started the episode, you were talking about the FSIS. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so they're actually pretty cool. Well, I mean, no government agency is super cool. But I mean,
as cool as a government agency can be.
So, kind of short story to talk about what FSIS does. They're the Food Safety Inspection Service, which I mean is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
They do inspections on food. So my little short story is at WSU, we have not necessarily a meat house, but we can process meat on our campus.
Gotcha.
And we sell it. Actually, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
So my animal science class, last fall, we got to go in and we got to watch a pig be processed, and that process was super cool.
Yeah.
And I won't go into a whole bunch of details. I know some people are a little skittish about that, but that's totally okay. If you have the opportunity to watch it, do it. It was very interesting to watch. So we had an FSIS inspector who was there the entire process before the pig was processed, and then the whole during and then the after.
Nice.
So the inspector goes out to where the pig is before it's being processed, and it looks at if there's any possible places the pig could be injured at all, if there's a nail sticking out of a board. They can't have feed 24 hours before. They always have to have water, which,
Right.
I mean, makes sense because that's kind of gross when you process.
Right.
Anyways, so the inspector makes sure the animal's habitat or the environment that it's in is safe and healthy. And it can also inspect there before the animal is, pre-mortem. It can inspect to see if the animal is still healthy. If it's coughing or, sneezing or, its eye is all puffy or something, the inspector's going to say, no, you can't process this animal because it's sick. So I was okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So then the pig comes in to be processed, and this is actually pretty cool. They flipped up the pig upside down and sliced it down the middle so then we could go through all the organs.
Right.
So he's just passing organs back left and right. Here's a kidney, there's the liver, there's a lung. I mean, it was really cool. So later on, when we brought the little organ cart over and we got to mess around, I got to hold the heart, by the way.
That's
that was
awesome.
My favorite part. That was so cool, and it was warm still, and I got to put my finger in the little tubes. Man, that was so awesome. Anyways, So we were looking through the organs, and he was like, okay, like there's a white spot on this liver. Like I'm gonna do a little bit more, like a further inspection of that. And there was something wrong with the liver, but the rest of the carcass was fine, as well as whatever organs that were salvaged. And so he said, okay, I'm going to condemn the liver. That will not go to consumption, but the rest of this carcass is fine. And he stamps this blue stamp that says FSIS, and he stamps it on the pig carcass,
Nice.
and then it's ready to be cut up into its meat cuts and then sold to consumers.
Cool. Well, that's a nice little story you got there about, a personal experience with one of the government agencies. That's pretty
cool.
And we also have probably the two more well-known agencies out of the four, the USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture, and the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration.
Yes, I definitely think those are the two most popular or well-known.
I always forget which one is responsible for which. I know one is for meat and eggs, and are mostly poultry, and then the other one is for, like, red meats and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you're right. One is for something, and then the other is for something else. So you can definitely go look that up in your own time, because we got a lot to talk about.
I would say which one's which, but I always get it mixed up, so I'm not even going to go over it. But yeah, one is responsible for one thing, one is responsible for the other. But yeah, so those are the four government agencies that hold the responsibility of inspecting all the different foods that go through our processes and making sure that the actual growing of the food is safe before it even reaches the point where it can go to the consumer's plate. It goes through a long and strenuous process of being inspected and tested to make sure that it is 100% secure before touching that shelf.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the nice thing to know, is that if you ever had any suspicions about how the food goes from, field to plate, it goes through a very long process. It gets tons and tons of checks and tests to make sure that it is 100% safe for your consumption.
Yeah.
So, if there's something that goes wrong along the way, it's got to go through a lot of people first. So it's kind of a good way to feel secure about that, at least. That being said, there still tends to be a major issue with food safety.
I agree.
In our country and in other countries, just across the world, there's a universal food safety epidemic that seems to be, for some reason, increasing.
I don't understand why,
and
though.
You would think that it would be decreasing because we're learning better ways of keeping our food safe, but it's increasing, which is very odd. I've seen a lot of studies by the World Health Organization and by a bunch of other just organizations and groups that are saying, like, oh, the food safety issue is getting worse. Like, how can it be getting worse? I thought we were learning how to fix this.
Yeah.
But I think the reason it's getting worse is because there has been less... at least in my observation of things, there has been less connection between consumer and farmer, and so the consumers have such a little understanding of how their food is raised that it causes a disconnect, which causes some issues in how the food to plate process gets. It's complicated to explain, but basically, because of the disconnect between consumer and farmer, there tends to be a disconnect in how the consumer is meant to handle food, and that leads to an issue in food safety. I know that was a big maze of complication. I was trying to figure out a way to explain that. I just kind of kept going.
Okay.
Basically, it can be broken down into, there's three primary causes of food safety concerns in the world. From what I've seen, there's little causes here and there, but the three primary causes are that it is due to foreign food issues. So other countries, as we know, are heavily less regulated than we are.
Yes.
We are one of the, if not the most heavily regulated country in terms of food safety and in terms of most things, in fact. But in terms of food safety in particular across the world. And so you have a lot of countries, especially lesser developed countries, that have very little to no regulation on their food safety. We talked about China in the last episode, how they have almost no regulations on what's considered organic, and they have a lot of contaminated food.
Yeah.
And so when we import that puts our population and our food safety rates in danger. So as a country, we still have the largest and safest food supply in the world, but that does not necessarily mean that we don't have our own issues, because it's going to be impossible to avoid all food safety issues, because that's just not going to happen. But
you can get 99.9999
right
forever percent,
and there's always going to be that 0.001 that's just going to throw a wrench in your gears. So
it happens with everything.
It does.
We are not perfect.
There's no way to avoid it. There's going to be some mistakes made along the way.
Yeah.
It's our job, though, to try to fix those mistakes before they get worse
or hit store shelves.
Right. And in recent years, there have been some issues with that we've noticed, particularly with some of the common foodborne illness outbreaks we've seen.
Yes.
Was it last year we had the romaine lettuce issue?
Yeah, I believe that was already last year.
Wow.
I'm getting so old.
Now, I don't remember, was the romaine lettuce issue with E. coli, or what was the strain of bacteria that was salmonella?
The most popular ones are E. coli, salmonella, and listeria.
Right.
So it was one of those three. I'm pretty sure it was E. coli.
I want to say it was E. coli.
I'm pretty sure it was E. coli.
E. coli, for some reason in our area, E. coli hits hard, everywhere.
Yeah, hardcore. The Valley, man.
So back in 2015, we had a massive outbreak of tomatoes with Chipotle. Chipotle almost got shut down as a restaurant because of it.
They should have.
I agree.
I don't like Chipotle.
I don't either.
Sorry, y'all. If y'all like Chipotle, have at it. But I am.
To each their own, but I'm not a fan of Chipotle. I'm not a fan of their...
They're too expensive, and I'm real cheap.
they're too expensive.
That's not the only purpose.
I
just
disagree with their stance on a lot of things, but it's just, besides the point.
They're anti-farming.
They are anti-farming, and they're...
Where do you think they get their food from?
Their advertisements are a little, counter... what's the word I'm looking for? They counter their own arguments a lot.
They're hypocritical.
They are very hypocritical. But anyways,
makes me mad.
Chipotle rants for another day. We'll have an episode dedicated to Chipotle ranting, which is probably not a good idea, but we'll do it anyway eventually. Anyways, they had a tomato out, or
maybe just for the heck of it, just for fun.
Just for fun, just maybe a live stream one, just messing around, you know what, Chipotle.
Take that,
dear Chipotle. Oh no.
Where do you think you get your food from? Question mark, and just leave it at that. Guarantee nobody answers. Or they say, the grocery store. The Cisco truck comes and drops it off.
Yeah, the trucks, obviously. They grow it in the trucks.
That's,
we're getting off topic. So,
oh my gosh.
Back in 2015, Chipotle had this massive outbreak of E. coli because of the tomatoes they were producing. Somewhere along the line, I don't remember the exact story, somewhere along the line, tomatoes got contaminated with cow manure, and the E. coli got mixed in with the cow manure, or with the tomatoes, and then the tomatoes got mixed in with lettuce, and then the lettuce passed it on to the meat, and there was just a big old cross contamination event going on across all Chipotle restaurants, and there was hundreds of people hospitalized by this thing, and there was quite a few that died too, and I was kind of concerned about this whole thing. They really should have been shut down. In all honesty, I mean, they had to give away food for free for months just to get their consumers back. That's how bad it was. I don't know how they were still making money, but anyways,
because people forget.
True, and some people don't even know what happened.
Yeah,
they're like, you know what, E. coli is not a big deal. I'm just gonna eat my tomato taco.
You know what? They are wrong. Wrong as heck.
E. coli is a big deal.
It is dangerous.
Don't eat your E. coli tomatoes, or lettuce, or anything that has E. coli in it. But
we all have E. coli in us.
The bad E. coli, though,
it's still bad if it gets out of your system.
True, that's fair. Anyways, back to the issue at hand. There's foodborne illness outbreaks that happen all the time that we're very rarely prepared for, and there's a whole long process which I have my handy dandy binder here.
Bring out the binder.
That's when stuff gets real. I have an entire.
Gosh, that stuff gets real.
I have an entire article here on the whole process of what happens whenever a foodborne illness outbreak occurs, who gets alerted first, and the whole what's the HCCP, the health something hazard
analysis critical control points. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes. What's the other one though? I'm thinking of the CDCP, but yes, the HCCP happens too. But yeah, there's a lot of processes that go into effect whenever a foodborne illness outbreak occurs, and it's long and complicated, and we'll get into it in another episode when I actually have a more in-depth talk about the food safety issue. This is kind of just an overview of the food safety issue as a whole. So
very general.
Right. So the three main causes of foodborne illnesses: one is foreign food issues. As I said earlier, a lot of foreign countries don't have proper regulation, or at least regulation to our standards. And there's very little funding to the inspection services in our country. So there's actually a pretty staggering fact that less than 2% of all of our food that we import into the United States is federally inspected.
Yikes.
So that means a lot of our food is not verified to be safe on a federal level.
Yikes.
So
that's a fat yikes.
That is very scary, which a lot of it has to do with us just having the honor system and saying, you know what, we trust this country, we trade with them, they're probably safe. And some of the time,
wrong.
Not so much. But what are you going to do? I mean, we don't have the funding. We're already $13 trillion, $14 trillion in debt. We don't have the funding to...
And it's only getting worse.
Yeah, it's only getting worse. And the inspection rates are getting lower. It was less than 2% 2 years ago. I think it's getting lower. Like, we're almost to a point where we don't even inspect stuff. We're just like, bring it in, it'll be fine. It's that bad.
Which gave me the chills. Please stop.
I got to go and
scaring me.
I got to go and tour this. Side note is very short story. I got to go and tour this facility, and they're called Compaq, and it's this company. They build machines. I actually got to go to the manufacturing plant where they build the machines. The machines sort through like fruit and vegetables and stuff, and they'll analyze it, see if there's any internal damage, external damage, any like. They'll sort them by size, by weight, by color. Like they have like this super advanced calibrating system to see if there's any
that's cool.
diseases on the fruit that's going to be harmful. Like they'll look at an orange, and if it's got wind scarring, they'll put it in one bucket. Whereas if it has a puncture, they'll put it in another bucket because the puncture's obviously going to be rotten. Yeah. So there's like this whole like advanced system, and they use it just for packing. And I was like, why don't they implement this in like food safety inspection? He's like, oh, I never thought about that. And I was like, that seems like a first priority is like put it in the inspection service first and then get to the packing. Like the technology's there and it works like insanely well, and they could probably make it work even better on a governmental level if they if they really implemented their staff towards it.
Man, that's cool.
So the technology exists to have better inspection and fewer staff or fewer resources to do it. We just don't really put the funding towards it. So what are you gonna do? So
apparently we have bigger pressing issues than the food that we consume at least 3 times a day.
I guess so. It's really upsetting. But that's the first issue.
That doesn't make any sense.
I could give you tons
of... A lot of stuff doesn't make any sense.
I gave you tons of numbers from my speech that I wrote a couple years ago that aren't important. They're about Chinese populations versus American populations and food safety concerns. Like the Chinese population is like 4.8 million or something like that. I don't remember exactly what that
Probably
was.
billion.
And it's like
we got like 38 or 39 million people in California.
Right. It's substantially larger than the United States. Like our population difference is huge, but the difference in which people are getting ill or dying from foodborne illnesses, it's not even proportionally larger. It's like a substantial amount larger, and it's pretty insane because they have such a little regulation. But I'm not gonna get into that right now.
But that makes sense. I mean, like our last episode, we talked about like organic food. I don't know how popular that is over there, but with those kinds of issues, and if people are consuming that much organic food, like they are gonna get a lot more sick.
Right, it's true. So there's a lot of factors that go into why the Chinese population is having such larger issues with their food safety and health issues than we are. Mm-hmm. So, but health and food safety issues and stuff, that's, again, a deeper topic to get into. The other primary reasons for food safety concerns to exist are, one of them is, and this is a very, very minuscule percentage of chances, but there is a tiny, tiny chance that something happens on the farm or during the packing process and it gets past the system where it gets onto the shelf and it's not safe. It's almost unheard of that actually happens, but we have seen it happen before. It's just it happens because there's, like Abby was saying earlier, we're not perfect. There's got to be mistakes made along the way.
We are human.
We are
Do not forget that.
We are the humans. We're not going to be able to make it work all the time. But the chances of an American farmer making a mistake like that, and the other thing is, if that does happen, the farmer does not do it deliberately. They have to eat that food too.
It is on accident.
So it's not on the farmer's shoulders to blame the foodborne illness on. Mm-hmm. Really, it's the person inspecting the food that is kind of to blame. Not to say there's no way to be laid on the farmer, but it's not that the farmer's doing it intentionally, and it's not something that we can blame farmers for all the time because it's such a tiny, minuscule percentage of the actual events happening.
Yeah.
And the final and probably most important, because it's the most common example of how foodborne illnesses are caused, is domestic abuse of food safety. Which that sounds really like dark when I say it like that.
Weird.
But like domestic
misuse of food.
That doesn't sound like proper though. Basically, people aren't doing food right. They don't know how to food, and so
what the heck?
They don't know how to food.
People don't know how to store, prepare, and put together their food.
If I look at my fancy dancy thingy here, I have this great article. It's by the Clayton County Board of Health, and it gave the 5 primary causes of foodborne illness outbreaks. 4 of them had to do. Here it is. The primary causes of foodborne illnesses by the Clayton County Board of Health. 4 of them have to do with consumers mishandling food. Only 1 has to do with purchasing food from unsafe sources. And that's not even to say that you purchase food that was grown and by a good farmer and put on the shelf in a grocery store and it happened to be unsafe.
This means like foreign food.
Right. It's buying food from places that aren't properly regulated, that aren't properly inspected to their fullest potential, that haven't been put through the ringer like the rest of the food has. And that even in itself is on the consumer's behalf to do that incorrectly.
All right, so all 5 of these are from the consumer.
All 5 of these are consumer issues. So the second one, failing to cook food adequately. So that's I would think that'd be a pretty common mistake. People, especially if you're like a first-time cook, like if you're just getting into cooking, you don't know how to do it properly.
But the biggest thing I think is like meat. Like if you cook a hamburger, like you got to cook that thing all the way through, or even at least to medium rare. Like you don't want to have a raw hamburger, or raw fish, raw meat.
Right, and that has to
kill you.
Yeah, raw chicken. I mean, there's a lot that has to do with people having a misunderstanding of how food safety and nutrition actually works, knowing the difference between a steak and ground beef.
They're like this.
Yes. So like ground beef is a lot less safe than, a lot less safe than steak is in terms of, like if you're cooking ground beef, you have to cook it all the way through, whereas a steak is because if you grind up meat into ground beef, it's going to be exposed to bacteria a lot more than a steak would on the inside.
Okay, I can see that.
So
but the thing with ground beef is it's pink, and then you just put it in the pan until it's brown.
Right. But
a steak, like unless you're cutting that thing in the open in the middle, like Gordon Ramsay style, you're okay, that cooks on the stove, and then you cook it in the oven. Then you pull it back out to finish the sear.
But in the argument of hamburgers, because hamburgers are made of ground beef.
Okay, hamburgers.
So, like you were saying, at the cooking.
You're making me hungry, man.
Me too. You just ate.
But I'm hungry.
You came in here with a quesadilla in your hand, and you're hungry.
Okay, but you know what? They put dang veggies in there, and I only asked for cheese, because I'm too cheap to pay for the meat to go in it.
At least the veggies didn't have E. coli in them, so be thankful for that.
And if they did? You wouldn't know that 20 minutes later, would you?
No, but
I would hope
just
not.
saying. Okay.
All right, so if I keel over and die tomorrow,
holding
it's
food
from
at
my
improper
quesadilla.
Holding food at improper temperatures. This goes kind of in the opposite of the first one. Not storing your food properly. Store your cold food with your other cold food. Store your hot food with hot food, and make sure that those temperatures stay regulated.
Like regular room temperature food, not hot food.
Well, like if you're like.
Yeah, I just leave my food sitting in the microwave and I put it on 6 hours and then I come home and it's still hot.
Well,
so
that's not what I mean. Like, don't store. You obviously don't store hot food very often, but like you don't leave hot food out.
I'm confused with this hot food business.
Like if you have a pizza, you don't leave the pizza out overnight. You know what I mean?
That's true. You put it back in the fridge.
Right. Which then it becomes cold food, but because it's hot food, it can't stay out in room temperature.
Okay.
Just properly know how to store your food. Don't worry about it.
I'm so sorry.
Using contaminated equipment. So this is kind of a big one that I think is probably the most common of all these issues, is people not knowing either how to properly clean their utensils or cutting boards, or forgetting to do it. Mm-hmm. Like I've heard a common practice is like you have like 3 different cutting boards, like one for vegetables, one for meat, and one for I don't know what the other one is, fruit maybe. It's supposed to be 3. I don't remember what the third one is supposed to be, but one's for vegetables, one's for meat. Because a lot of common mistakes is people will have they have a chicken on their cutting board and they'll like chop up the chicken and they'll move the chicken out and put it in wherever they're going to put it, and then they cut lettuce on that same cutting board without cleaning it.
Ooh.
And they get all that nasty salmonella chicken juice on the lettuce.
That's a no-no.
That's a big no-no, and that's how you get salmonella. So make sure you clean your equipment. Clean your cutting boards, clean your knives. Don't cut a knife.
Clean your knives.
Clean your knives.
Your knives.
We're in Boston now. Clean your knives. Clean your cutting boards. Clean your chicken.
Whoa. And
if you cut your chicken with a knife, don't use that same knife on your tomatoes until you already washed it. That's how you get salmonella. So
delicious.
Really tasty. And the last one is poor personal hygiene. This should be a common sense one. Wash your hands before you touch food.
Well, yeah, like before you prepare dinner, like you wash your hands.
Like I would think that'd be common sense, but like
apparently it's not.
I guess not. Like it's really.
This is like washing your hands after you use the bathroom.
Or like whenever like don't.
You just gotta do it.
Right. Like don't prepare food if you're sick. Don't be coughing in the kitchen. Don't be sneezing all over your food.
Chew all over the chicken. You don't do that.
Chicken. No. And that's like a common decency thing. Like it's not even like a food safety. That's just like a don't sneeze on people's food thing. That's just nasty.
Unless you really don't like them.
Unless you really don't like them, but
but
even then,
maybe. But even then, it's like
it's rude.
Let's not do that.
But yeah, so those are the 5 primary causes of foodborne illnesses. And notice none of them had to do with farmers, none of them had to do with foreign, well, one had to do with foreign food.
But nothing with manufacturers or processors. It's all the consumer.
Right. It's a massive majority of it is just people not understanding how to properly handle food, and that should be taught in school. I thought that'd be common sense, but apparently we need to have a crash course on how to handle food.
Maybe we can do that next. You know what we should do? We should make an episode of like us cooking.
Yes, like food safety, like
okay,
on,
look,
like hands
Brendan,
on.
like wash your hands. Okay, now dry your hands.
Yes.
Then you got all your cutting boards out and they're
practicing
labeled.
the 5 different mistakes,
dude.
Yes.
How fun would that be, though?
That is a great idea. That's like hands-on education.
And then you get food in the end.
Yes, I like that idea.
Man,
We're gonna have
okay,
to do
you
that.
better write that down.
I'm putting in my notes right now. Next time you come back into town from Washington, we're doing that. Unless you can find time before you leave, but probably not. But
probably not.
I'm just gonna put cooking with Abby.
Man, how good is that though?
That is awesome,
dude.
That's such a good idea.
How
that's
fun
like,
would that be?
And that's like a fun like interactive episode of like Talk
Yeah.
Agony, which I don't know how to cook, so you're gonna have to kind of take the lead, but I can figure it out.
Well, good thing that I'm living with a roommate and I gotta cook my own food.
So yeah, and yeah, that'll be fun. We'll have to do that.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, those are the.
We'll just crop that out. That little.
Maybe we'll see. During the editing process, I'll kind of see what I want to do with it. It'd be kind of fun though.
A new sneak peek to our new episode, so stay tuned.
Probably like next year, but you know.
it's gonna take a while, but we'll get it to you.
Maybe over Christmas break, we'll see.
That's probably not a bad idea. New Year's. Has to be after New Year's.
Oh, true. We could do that.
Or after Christmas. Flying to Texas.
We'll find it out. Anyways, work that out off air. Now you guys don't have to listen to us rack our brains trying to figure out when we're going to meet again.
It's cool.
It's a headache. So, moving on.
You know what? It is not my fault that we were both busy people. It is half my fault.
I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying it's a headache to try and schedule things.
I agree. But we're making it happen.
We're making it work. It's going to happen.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Moving on. So that was
not busting any more myths. What are you doing?
That's our transitionary piece now. So those are your 3 primary causes. Stop it.
Okay, transition. Let's go.
Those are our 3 primary causes of foodborne illnesses and how to prevent them. So now we're going to move into kind of the larger picture of what is being done about this issue. So we kind of address how it's an issue and why it's an issue and who it's an issue and
who is an issue.
Now we're kind of addressing like what can be done about it. Really, the most simple thing that can be done about it is just like we talked about: wash your hands, clean your equipment, know where you're getting your food from, make sure you're storing your food properly and cooking it properly, and
follow the directions.
Follow the directions.
They are there for a reason.
Instructions are there to help you. Don't try to manage everything on your own. And I wanted to kind of throw this thing in there so that way we sound smart. But we know what the
wow. Way to just throw the both of us under the bus. Yeah, Brendan and I are both dumb, apparently.
No, we did our research. We just, since this is an overview, we weren't going to go into super depth, but I thought it'd be kind of important. We weren't going to go into extreme detail about food safety, but we can't make a food safety episode without mentioning probably the most important piece of food safety legislation that's ever been mentioned, and that is the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2011.
Please.
So the Food Safety Modernization Act was enacted in 2011 by Barack Obama, and it was instated as a way to basically put heavier regulations on the inspection, basically the inspection service of food. So every time food is imported, inspectors have to go through these long, grueling tasks to ensure the food is safe before it ever reaches the shelves, which in theory could be a good thing, but there's also some ramifications to it, which I won't get into right now just because there's a lot to them and we don't have a whole lot of time left for this episode.
Okay.
But we'll go over that in a future episode once we have a more in-depth kind of professional look on the Food Safety Modernization Act and food safety as a whole. But yeah, and then like we're talking about, just the common issues that we can control, work on them. Wash your hands, cook your food, store it properly, all that kind of stuff. The bigger issues, we can't control them, so there's no point in worrying about them. The government agencies are doing their job. You should have to trust that they can do their job effectively, and they are doing their job to the best of their ability. And as we can see, we have the safest food supply in the world, so they're doing a pretty dang good job, if you ask me. I mean, if we have a foodborne illness outbreak once every, what has it been, like 5 years? 4 years? Like, I mean, that's not great, but it's
probably better than other countries.
It's better than other countries, and it's better than former years.
Yeah.
We used to have that issue a lot more often than we do now, and I just had an idea about cookie dough. Anyways,
I Alright.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's probably not a bad one to do an episode on.
cookie dough.
I like cookie dough, but you're not supposed to eat raw eggs, so
Right.
like, you shouldn't eat a lot of it.
So but you can make like raw eggless cookie dough, and that's
Ew.
a thing, which is
That
like
probably tastes gross.
the cookies don't form properly, but it still tastes fine-ish from what I've heard. I never actually tried it.
Okay, fine-ish.
We'll try it one day in the cooking
I'm
episode.
not convinced.
In the cooking episode,
I'm not convinced.
we will try cookie dough and be like, "Hey, are we gonna get salmonella? Let's find
Also,
out."
this gluten-free stuff. We gotta talk about that because
We'll have a gluten-free episode.
Because, like, my mom, she said she ate some gluten-free cookie once, and she said it was the worst cookie she ever ate. It was such trash. And so people are, like, a friend of mine, so I told my friend Taylor, I was like, dude, like, she's like, hey, Abby, like, blah, blah, blah is gluten-free. And I was like, you know what, they need to put that gluten crap back in there because I need it in there because it's...
we need to have a full episode on gluten.
Why take it out?
Gluten needs to be its own episode. That's a whole...
Okay,
that's
let's
a
do
whole
that.
nother
Because
episode.
actually a friend of mine, like, she can't eat gluten because she has, like, a stomach problem.
Right. There's viable cause to have gluten-free in your diet.
Okay,
But it's not
for the average person, keep the gluten in there.
It's like saying like you should have a peanut-free diet because some people are allergic to peanuts.
Uh-huh.
Like it's literally the same. Unless you have the actual biological issue with gluten, there's no reason to cut gluten out of your diet. It's just there's never been any.
It's all a scam.
So when we're doing our cooking episode, we'll have a little like nutritional talk on the side. Just be
Oh
like,
my gosh.
it's actually good for you. It's a combination of proteins that, if you eat it properly, can be very beneficial to your diet. And if you have problems
How do you
with
know
it,
that?
don't eat it.
How do you know that?
I took a nutrition class.
Oh.
We learned about gluten.
Like human nutrition?
Yeah.
That's lame.
Well, I'm not gonna take animal nutrition until I get to Fresno State because it's hard at COS. But
Also lame. I'm taking nutrition.
I'm sorry
my
we
junior year.
can't all be nutritionists.
Not this
Abby.
fall, but the next fall I will take animal nutrition.
I'm
and then
sorry we
ruin
can't-
in nutrition my senior year.
I'm sorry we can't all work in animal nutrition labs and.
Should have gone to WSU. Y'all thought I was crazy. Look where I'm at now. Sorry, I'm getting a little crazy this episode. Like I'm feeling very like jazzed right now.
I can see that. You know, it's good for the energy of the episode.
I'm a little
It
spicy,
kinda,
so
you know, we're talking about food safety. It's kind of a hot topic. It's a good issue to have a lot of passion into, and I'm kind of tired for this episode. So it's been a good balance of like you being super hyped and
I'm
me being
like
super mellow.
all over the place.
So yeah, it's nice.
I got a lot of hand movements.
It's a good yin yang going on. You got to
Going
have your,
on.
you know, yeah. So I don't know. I think it was a good episode.
I'm so sorry. We're getting real off track. I mean, cookies and now this. Is there anything else?
I think that's it. That's all I have for this episode. It's kind
shoot,
of is a
man.
little sporadic, but you know, it was a nice.
It was good.
It was a nice formulaic episode in the sense that we cover all the points we wanted to cover for an overview of the food safety issue. And like I said, we will probably do a future episode, or at least I will do a future episode. I'm not sure if Abby's gonna be there for it or not.
I'll be gone for like 15 weeks, so
She's gonna be ditching us again.
sorry guys.
But
I'll be here. I'll still record videos.
Yeah, she's gonna be doing our off-site reporting up in good old Washington,
Ooh.
talking to some horse girls and some nutrition lads. And
Taylor!
I really hope she watches these episodes and listens to how much you talk about her.
I'm gonna have to tell her. Like,
So-
yo, what's up?
No, we will have an actual full in-depth look at the Food Safety Modernization Act as a whole because it's actually becoming a very relevant piece of documentation right now.
Okay.
So we'll have a full episode on that, on the food safety issue as a whole. We kind of just wanted to do like a precursor, kind of like we did the GMO episode, like do like a precursor like
General overview.
of-
This is what's going on.
Right, and I still have yet to do the full-on GMO episode, which I will do eventually. I know, but
You better add that to the list too.
basically all the episodes, unless I have like an actual professional person sitting in this chair to talk about it, it's an overview. No offense. Because we can provide a really good amount of information on it, but there are just certain topics like water. I cannot do a water episode unless I have a water like
Definitely
specialist
not me.
here. Like we can talk about like,
Don't call me about water.
like Evan and I can talk about water for a good amount of time and like miss a lot of stuff just because there's so much.
You know what I know about water? Is that it's really good and I drink it all day long.
Good job. I'm proud of you. Drink your water.
Drink milk too. It's
Drink
good for
milk.
you.
I don't drink it, but don't listen to me.
Why are we friends?
But yeah, so that's gonna be it for this episode. Thank all of you so much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed
and
our
listening to our
crazy bantering.
crazy
but
conversations.
it's it's all good fun. I think it's nice to have like a a good mix of like, you know, serious talk and then kind of just like who knows what we're even talking about anymore.
I'm excited for our cooking episode though.
Me too.
Like that's all I can think about right now.
We need to get that done like now, like plan it out and have it to a point like so we're have all the materials, all the resources, and like know what we're gonna make and yeah.
Maybe we can invite like some other people.
Yes, so like a whole like cooking show, like Talk Ag to Me, like Cook Ag with Me.
Rachel Ray, Cook Ag with Me. Dude,
I love it.
Did you guys hear that? Whoa, that was so cool.
Look at our audio spike.
I'm real excited now.
She's very excited. That's gonna be a good episode. Okay, so
dude, that's food, man.
That is food. That is in fact food. Cook Ag with Me. That's the new thing. So that's gonna be our. We're gonna have to do like a.
When I cook in my apartment, I can make like videos. I'm like, this is what you should Cook Ag with Me.
Do it. And then we'll have like the big group Cook Ag with Me with like you, me, and Evan, and then we'll bring in like some other people that we know and have like a whole like talk about gluten-free diets and stuff and just like rant about Chipotle and it'll be great.
Chipotle.
That's where we get all of our witty bantering out. Like all the important stuff goes into the episodes, all the like miscellaneous conversations go into Cook Ag with Me.
I think we should also like include in the Cook Ag with Me, like if we know anybody who's like vegetarian or vegan, like why they chose those routes.
I know some vegans we could bring on the show.
I mean, like that would be something like really interesting to see what like their diet is like.
Yeah.
What they're either like getting better nutrition wise, getting worse nutrition wise, and like what we're getting.
I wanted to do a vegan episode just because they have such an interesting
it's so different
perspective.
Yeah.
And everyone's vegan for different reasons. That's what I've learned. Nobody's vegan for the same reason. Like everyone you talk to is like, oh, I'm vegan for environmental reasons, or I'm vegan for animal rights reasons, or I'm vegan for health reasons, I'm vegan because my family is. Like everyone's got, or I'm vegan for religious reasons. Like there's so many different reasons to be to take on that lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle. It's not a dietary choice. It's a full-on lifestyle you have to adapt. And so it'd be kind of an interesting episode if we did a Cook Ag with Me episode.
That would be so cool.
To bring in some vegans and be like, hey, talk to us about what you do.
I'd be down for that.
Let's do it. Future plans are in the making. Now that we talked about nothing relating to food safety for a solid 10 minutes.
I ain't even mad. That was good.
It was a good episode. But we hit our points, which was what I wanted to do. We talked about the agencies involved, talked about the issues with foodborne illness regarding outside foreign food, domestic food, and mishandling of food by consumers. We talked about the agencies and how they're fixing it, the new regulations, Food Safety Modernization Act, and wash your hands and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah.
We'll go over that with the Cook Ag with Me episode.
We'll have like a whole like step-by-step process before we actually do the cooking. Like, you know, here's me washing my hands. Here's us cooking the food at the proper temperature. Here's us storing the food.
Here's us pulling it out of the fridge because it's been sitting at 38 degrees Fahrenheit.
Everything's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. You had a good idea.
I'm so excited.
So look forward to that.
I'm literally so stoked.
If you have any suggestions on what you want us to cook, let's do that.
Put those in the comments down below.
Hit us up on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you can find Talk Ag to Me. Say hey.
Attach the recipe though.
And
if you find
attach the recipe
good.
and hashtag it Cook Ag with Me. That way we can find it and we'll know and we'll be like, hey, this person said let's cook this, so we're gonna cook this today. And like the entire time,
this could be a whole like mini series. I don't know how long this mini series is gonna be, and I'm not gonna like restrict it to a number of episodes. This would be so cool though.
Because we had Ag Mythbusters was a fun mini series, and people loved that, and like they loved being involved with it. And they loved talking about it.
Okay, but Cook Ag with Me.
That would be so much fun. Like people like love to interact with it. We can even like live stream as we're going, and just like people will be like, hey, you should do this and that, and we'll like talking and stuff.
All right, y'all. Hashtag Cook Ag with Me.
Hashtag Cook Ag with Me. Send us recipes. Send us stuff.
In the link up above that will never show up because Brendan doesn't like to edit.
I will edit it at some point, probably not.
We just put the hashtag right here.
Yeah. Good idea.
I'll do that. Hashtag Cook Ag with Me.
I'll do that. And so that is all I have for this episode.
Me too. Thanks guys for tuning in.
Thank all you so much for listening and tuning in for all of our interesting conversations.
Our craziness.
At least we got like the important stuff out of the way early, which was good.
And then the fun stuff later.
And if people didn't want to stick around for that long, at least they got their fill of the food safety stuff. It's a good mix. But that's all we've got. So thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.
Bye guys.